Hello everyone. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment with where you from and what time it is. That way, YouTube will keep pulling you stories like this. Now, let the shadows take over. When I was 16, I lived with my mom in Dayton, Ohio, in the kind of neighborhood where the mailman knew your name and people still waved when you drove by. The houses were modest, two-story builds from the 60s, lined up on narrow streets where kids still rode bikes in summer and snow shoveled into piles in the winter, froze into gray mountains that lasted until March. My parents had split up a few years earlier, and while my dad stayed in town, I ended up with my mom full-time. She had inherited my grandparents' house, an old white place with chipped paint and a sagging porch, and that's where we lived. At first, nothing seemed wrong. My mom had always been a little strict, but I chalked it up to stress. Divorce changes people. Bills pile up. Life wears you down. But as time went on, I started to notice little things, the kind of things you push to the back of your mind at first because you don't want to believe they mean anything. She started talking to herself more, not muttering or sighing the way people do when they're frustrated, but full conversations, like she was sitting across from someone and answering their questions. The worst part was she always did it near the basement door. That basement gave me the creeps since I was a kid. The smell was the first thing you noticed. Damp cement, mildew, and something sour underneath it like old milk. The stairs sagged and creaked, the kind of steps where you could hear exactly which board someone stepped on. A single bare bulb hung over the landing, swinging when the furnace kicked on. My mom kept the door locked with a heavy latch. She told me it was to keep me safe so I didn't fall, and I believed her. At least I wanted to. But then the whispers started. One night in November, I came home from a friend's house just after 10. The street was silent, snow falling in big flakes under the glow of the street lamps. Inside, the house was dim except for one lamp in the living room. I set my bag down and heard my mom's voice. I thought maybe she was on the phone, but then I realized the sound was coming from the basement door. I stopped in the hallway holding my breath. She was whispering. Her words drifted out in broken pieces. Not yet. He isn't ready. No, not tonight. My skin prickled. It sounded like she was arguing with someone, but I didn't hear any reply. I stepped closer, leaning in, trying to catch more. Then her voice snapped like a whip. "Go upstairs, Tyler." I froze. She hadn't opened the door. She hadn't even raised her voice, but somehow she knew I was standing there. I swallowed hard, muttered something like, "Okay, Mom," and hurried upstairs to my room. I locked the door and pressed my ear against it, listening as she moved back and forth below me, her footsteps creaking across the old wood. I barely slept that night. After that, I couldn't ignore it. She spent more and more time around the basement. She'd leave late at night and come back with heavy bags, never explaining what was in them. Once I peeked when she wasn't looking. The groceries weren't normal. Raw meat wrapped in brown paper, gallons of milk, entire loaves of bread. None of it ever made it to our fridge. By morning, it was gone. She also stopped sleeping in her bed. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and see the faint glow of the basement bulb shining under the crack of the door, hear her pacing, talking, humming to herself. Once, I heard her laugh. A high, giddy laugh that didn't sound like her at all. I started making excuses to stay out later. Homework at the library, group projects, nights at friends' houses. Anything to keep me from being there after dark. But I couldn't stay away forever. One night in January, I came downstairs for water and found her crouched by the basement door. She had a plate in her hands, and she was sliding food through the gap underneath. At first I thought maybe she'd lost it. Maybe she was feeding a stray cat that somehow got locked down there. But then I saw them. Fingers. Pale, bony, too thin to belong to anyone healthy. They shot out from the darkness and snatched the food from her hand. I gasped and dropped my glass. It shattered on the floor. My mom turned her head slowly, strands of hair falling over her face, and she smiled at me. a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "He's hungry," she whispered. "You'll understand soon." I ran back upstairs and shoved a chair under my door. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat there shaking, listening to the faint thuds from the basement, the dragging sound of something heavy moving across concrete. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She made pancakes, poured orange juice, asked about my homework. She hummed while she did the dishes, but her eyes were wrong. Too bright, too wide. When she smiled, I saw her tongue dart across her lips, like she was savoring some secret. From then on, I couldn't stand being alone with her. I started keeping a knife under my pillow. I counted the hours until sunrise every night, and the more I noticed, the worse it got. Neighbors mentioned strange noises at night, metallic banging, muffled screams. One of them even asked if we were doing renovations. I laughed it off, but inside I was dying. Finally, I decided I had to know. One night when she left for her diner shift, I went to the kitchen and reached up to the jar above the fridge. That's where she kept the spare key. My hand shook as I fitted into the lock. The latch clicked open, louder than I expected, and I froze, half expecting her to come storming in. But the house was quiet. The smell hit me first. Stronger than before, a rancid mix of rot and something metallic. I gagged but pushed the door open and stepped onto the creaking stairs. The bulb above swung gently, shadows stretching across the walls. And then I saw him. In the corner, chained to the wall, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 11. His skin was gray, stretched tight over his bones. His lips were cracked, his eyes sunk in black hollows. He stared at me with a wild hunger that made my stomach twist. "Help me," he rasped, his voice raw like he hadn't spoken in weeks. The chain rattled as he reached toward me. I stumbled back, bile burning my throat. That's when I heard the front door slam upstairs. Mom was home. Panic surged through me. I bolted up the steps, slammed the door shut, and turned the key. Her footsteps echoed across the floorboards above, her voice calling my name in this sweet sing-song tone that made my blood run cold. "Tyler," she crooned. "Come downstairs. It's okay. He wants to meet you." I ran to my room, stuffed a bag, and climbed out the window into the freezing night air. I didn't stop running until I reached a friend's house. I moved in with my dad the next day and never went back. But here's the part that keeps me awake at night. When I was at the bottom of those stairs, staring at that boy, he looked at me like he knew me. And when he rasped out, "Help me," it wasn't just a plea. It sounded like recognition. And the truth is, he looked just enough like me to make me wonder if he wasn't just some random kid. Maybe he was something worse. Maybe he was practice. Maybe my mom had been getting ready for me all along. The first time I realized something was wrong with my mom wasn't because of the way she talked, or even the way she smiled when neighbors waved. It was the night she locked me in my room. I was 14 years old, sitting on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hands, when I heard the distinct metallic click of the key turning in the lock from the other side. I thought it was an accident at first, so I called out, "Hey, Mom." Her voice floated through the door, soft, almost sweet, but firm in a way that gave me chills. "Stay put tonight, Evan. Don't come out, no matter what you hear." At first, I laughed. I thought maybe she was trying to spook me, like a weird mom joke. But when I tried the knob and it didn't budge, I realized she wasn't kidding. I stood there staring at the door, my pulse quickening. What exactly did she think I would hear? That night, I found out. I stayed awake, lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling. At first the house was quiet, just the occasional hum of the furnace kicking on and the creak of old wood shifting. Then I heard her footsteps, slow, deliberate, back and forth down the hallway. Every few minutes, she stopped right outside my door. I could hear her breathing long and steady, as if she were listening for me. I held my breath, gripping my blanket tight until she moved again. But the worst part wasn't the footsteps. It was her voice. She whispered. Not words I could make out, but hushed syllables, like she was carrying on a conversation with someone I couldn't hear. Once, she laughed. Not her normal laugh, but high-pitched and strange, like a child's giggle echoing in the wrong throat. That sound burrowed into my bones. In the morning, she unlocked my door like nothing happened. She stood there smiling with a plate of pancakes in her hand, asking me about school, like the night before hadn't existed. I wanted to confront her, but my voice caught in my throat. I told myself it must have been a dream. But the next night, it happened again. And the night after that, every evening she locked me in. Every evening she paced the hallway, whispering and laughing, sometimes crying. And every morning she was the same mom, cheerful and calm, acting like nothing had changed. I started to notice other things too. At dinner, she picked at her food like she wasn't hungry. But later, when I got up for water, I'd find the kitchen a mess. Bread torn apart, raw vegetables shredded down to nubs, half-drained cartons of milk. She carried trays upstairs late at night, and when I asked her about them, she just said, "Don't worry, sweetheart, I'm taking care of it." But it was the door at the end of the hall that bothered me most. The locked room. It had a brass knob and a thick padlock. I had asked her about it years before, and she always gave the same answer. That's just storage. Stay out of it. If I lingered near it, she appeared instantly, her voice sharp and commanding, nothing like her usual sing-song tone. Stay away from that door, Evan. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I pressed my ear against the wall that connected my bedroom to that room. For a while, there was silence. Then I heard it, scratching. Slow, deliberate, nails dragging across wood. My stomach twisted. I pressed harder, holding my breath. And then I heard it. A faint, trembling whisper. "Please, help me." I stumbled back so fast I knocked over my lamp. My chest heaved as I tried to tell myself it wasn't real. Just pipes. Just my imagination. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. For the next week the noises continued. Some nights it was scratching. Some nights it was muffled sobs. Other nights I heard dull thumps against the wall. And every night my mom's footsteps, her pacing, her whispers, sometimes her laughter. I started to pay closer attention during the day. She was slipping. Her hands shook when she poured coffee. Her eyes darted to the hallway when I moved around upstairs. She grew more controlling too. She searched my backpack before school. She checked my phone at dinner. She even stood outside the bathroom door while I showered, humming softly until I turned off the water. I knew something was horribly wrong, but I didn't know what to do. Then came the night I almost opened the door. She had gone out to get groceries, and I stood there in the hallway staring at the padlock. My hand shook as I reached for it. Just as my fingers brushed the cold metal, I heard it. "Please, please don't let her hurt me again." A child's voice, muffled but desperate. My heart pounded in my ears. I scrambled back to my room, too terrified to do anything else. But that voice haunted me. It was so real. Too real to ignore. The next night I couldn't take it anymore. While my mom was in the shower, I crept into her bedroom. The smell hit me immediately. Bleach, ammonia, something chemical and sharp. On her dresser, next to neatly folded laundry, was a small ring of keys. My hands shook as I grabbed them. I crept down the hallway, every floorboard groaning under my weight. The padlock loomed in front of me, heavy and menacing. I slid the key in. It clicked open louder than I expected, and I froze, listening for her footsteps. Nothing. I pushed the door open. The stench inside was overwhelming. Sweat, rot, and something metallic, like blood. I gagged, covering my nose with my sleeve. And then I saw her. In the corner, crouched on the floor, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her hair was matted, her skin pale and bruised, her wrists rubbed raw from rope burns. Her eyes were wide, hollow, filled with terror. She crawled toward me, her lips trembling. "Please, help me." My stomach turned to ice. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat, and then I heard it. The shower shut off. Pipes groaned. She was coming. The girl grabbed my sleeve with surprising strength, her nails digging into my skin. "Don't leave me," she begged. Her voice was so raw, so desperate, it made my chest ache. I tore free, slammed the door shut, clicked the padlock back into place and ran to my room just as my mom's footsteps hit the hallway. She saw me there, standing frozen, my face pale, the keys still in my hand. Her smile spread slowly, unnaturally wide. Her eyes gleamed in the dim light. "What are you doing?" she asked softly. I stammered something about getting water. She stepped closer, so close I could smell the bleach on her clothes. She brushed a strand of hair from my forehead, her touch lingering. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Good boys don't open doors that aren't theirs." That night, she locked me in my room again. But this time, there were no whispers, no pacing, only screams. The girl's voice, shrill and agonized, begging for help. My mom's voice, low and guttural, not human at all, rising into a manic laughter that echoed through the walls. I pressed my hands over my ears, curled into a ball, tears streaming down my face as the sounds went on for hours. By morning, the house was silent. The padlock was gone. The door looked like it had never been locked. When I asked her about it, she smiled calmly and said, "What door, sweetheart?" I moved in with my dad soon after, but even now, years later, I still hear that girl's voice in my dreams, whispering my name. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear scratching at the walls again. And the part that keeps me awake the most is this, and the voice always knew my name. I've told people before that my childhood in Topeka was strange, but I don't think anyone ever really believed me. My mom had a way of making things look normal when she wanted them to. To neighbors, teachers, even relatives, she was the hard-working single mom who kept a tidy yard and baked pies for church fundraisers. She smiled a lot in public. She hugged me in front of others. She never missed a chance to tell the world how proud she was of me. But that was the daytime version of her. At night, I knew a different mom entirely. It started a few months after my dad left. I was 9 at the time, old enough to know divorce hurt her, but too young to understand how badly it broke her. At first, she just seemed stricter, laying down new rules. No leaving my room without permission, no eating unless she served me, no talking back. But then she introduced something she called nightly lessons. The first one seemed almost harmless. She shook me awake around midnight, her face inches from mine, whispering that I needed to get up, that it was time to learn. My heart raced from the shock of being jolted out of sleep, but I followed her. She led me to the kitchen table and sat me down. She leaned across, her eyes wide, and asked, "If someone broke in tonight, how long do you think you could stay quiet?" I blinked at her, unsure what to say. She didn't blink back. "Answer me," she demanded. I stammered something about being quiet for a long time. She slammed her hand against the table so hard the salt shaker toppled over. "Not good enough. You'd be dead already." I sat frozen in place, trembling. Finally, she smiled, almost like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the forehead and said, "Tomorrow, you'll do better." Then she sent me back to bed. That was the beginning. The next night, the lesson was different. This time, she shook me awake and told me to hide. "Pretend someone is in the house," she whispered. "Hide, and don't make a sound until I find you." My chest tightened with fear, but I obeyed. I crept into my closet, pulling the door shut behind me. At first it was silent, just my own ragged breathing. Then I heard her footsteps, slow, deliberate, dragging across the floor. "Evan," she called softly, almost sing-song. "Where are you?" I clutched my knees to my chest, trying not to breathe. She walked past my closet once, then again, her steps circling like a predator. Suddenly, her nails scratched down the closet door. I bit my lip to keep from whimpering. Then silence. I thought maybe she had gone, but the door swung open violently, light flooding in. She grabbed me by the arm and yanked me out. "Too easy," she said coldly. "If I were an intruder, you'd be gone." She dragged me back to bed, tucked me in, kissed my forehead like everything was fine. It went on like that for weeks. Every night, a new lesson. She'd make me practice holding my breath, standing still for hours, untying knots she tied around my wrists. If I cried, she told me I was weak. If I resisted, she told me I'd die first when the time came. I never knew what the time meant, but she spoke about it often, whispering, "You need to be ready when they come." I started falling asleep in school. Teachers scolded me, kids teased me. When I tried to explain that my mom kept me up at night, they laughed, thinking it was a joke. Even when I told one teacher about the drills, she chuckled and said, "Oh, your mom must be really protective." Nobody believed me. Then came the basement. One night, I told her I was too tired. I begged her to let me sleep. Her face hardened, and without a word, she grabbed my wrist and dragged me down the narrow stairs. The basement smelled of damp concrete and mold. She shoved me into the corner, shut off the light, and locked the door. My screams echoed in the dark, but she didn't answer. Hours passed. I cried until I couldn't anymore, until the silence and the shadows pressed in from every side. When she finally let me out, she crouched down to my level, her eyes shining in the dim light. "See? The dark makes you strong," she whispered. Then she smiled, kissed me on the forehead, and sent me back to bed as if nothing had happened. From then on, the basement became part of the lessons. Sometimes she'd leave me there for an hour, sometimes all night. Sometimes she'd bang on the door from the other side, screaming my name, just to see if I'd scream back. If I did, she'd punish me. If I stayed silent, she'd tell me I was learning. It escalated slowly. She began tying my hands with rope, leaving me to figure out how to escape. She'd blindfold me and lead me around the house, whispering that I needed to learn to navigate in the dark. Once she even poured cold water over me while I slept, telling me I had to learn to wake up under pressure. By the time I was 12, I was a wreck. My body shook at sudden noises. I jumped whenever someone called my name. I lived in constant fear of the nights, of what new lesson she'd invent. Then came the final lesson. It was summer, and the heat made it hard to sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan when I heard her footsteps. My stomach dropped. The door creaked open, and she stood there in the glow of the hallway light, her silhouette tall and thin. "It's time for your final lesson," she whispered. Before I could respond, she stepped into the room and pressed something cold and sharp against my throat. A knife. My breath caught in my chest. She leaned close, her lips brushing my ear. "If someone came for you tonight, would you fight or would you beg?" My whole body shook. I couldn't answer. "Wrong answer," she hissed. She yanked me out of bed and shoved me into the hallway. "Run!" I froze. "Run!" she screamed, her voice so loud it rattled the windows. I bolted, my feet pounding against the wood floor. I ran into the kitchen, then the living room, my mind blank with terror. She followed slowly, dragging the knife along the wall, humming under her breath. Every time I turned a corner, she was there, smiling, her eyes wide with something unhinged. I ended up in the basement, cornered. She stood at the top of the stairs, her shadow stretching down toward me. She tilted her head, studying me like an experiment. "You're strong now," she whispered. "But not strong enough, not yet." Then she laughed. The sound echoed down the stairwell, high-pitched and manic, and I collapsed to the floor, sobbing. When I woke the next morning, I was in my bed. The knife was gone. She was in the kitchen, humming, making pancakes. She smiled at me, kissed my cheek, and asked if I wanted syrup. I left that house as soon as I could. I lived with my dad after that, but the damage was already done. Even now, years later, I wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, convinced someone is in the house. I find myself hiding in closets, holding my breath, waiting for footsteps. And sometimes, in the silence, I hear her voice again. Run. I grew up in the hills of West Virginia, just outside a forgotten town where most of the shops had closed signs that had been hanging so long their paint had peeled. The house my mother and I lived in wasn't much better. A sagging old farmhouse with warped wood siding and windows that rattled whenever the wind blew. The roof leaked, the well pump groaned every time you tried to draw water, and the trees surrounding us seemed to creep closer every year. I used to joke with myself that if I left the house long enough, I'd come back and find it swallowed whole by the forest. We didn't have much, but my mom never admitted that. To the few neighbors within shouting distance, she painted us as fine. She'd put on her church dress every Sunday morning, carry her battered Bible pressed to her chest, and smile like she had no worries in the world. They all saw her as devout, strong, a woman who'd held things together after my dad left. I think part of me wanted to believe that too. But at night, especially Sunday nights, I learned a different side of her. It began when I was 13. My mom had always been religious, but after the divorce, her faith twisted into something obsessive. She spent hours hunched over the Bible, underlining passages, circling words until the paper tore, scribbling frantic notes in the margins. Sometimes I'd hear her muttering aloud, reading the same verse over and over until her voice cracked. She said the preacher in town was wrong, that he'd been blinded by false teachings, and that only she could hear God's true voice. The first ritual happened on a hot Sunday night in June. I remember because the cicadas screamed so loudly outside that I couldn't hear myself think. I was half asleep when I felt her hand shake me awake. I opened my eyes and saw her standing there with a lantern, its yellow light flickering across her face. She didn't look angry or even tired. She looked eager. "Get up," she whispered. "It's time." "Time for what?" I mumbled, rubbing my eyes. She didn't answer. She just gripped my wrist and pulled me from bed. Barefoot, still in my pajamas, she marched me out the back door into the heavy summer night. The ground was damp from a late storm, and the smell of wet earth filled my nose as we walked deeper into the woods. She carried her Bible in one hand and a jar of salt in the other. We walked until the farmhouse was lost behind the trees, until even the moonlight seemed to disappear. Then she stopped in a small clearing, the grass pressed flat like it had been walked on too many times. She poured the salt in a wide circle and shoved me inside it. "Stand still," she commanded. She flipped open the Bible and began to read. At first her voice was steady, the words recognizable. But as she went on, her tone rose, her words twisting, phrases jumbled together in ways I'd never heard before. She read until she was nearly screaming, until her face was red and sweat dripped from her brow. Then she fell silent. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and wild, and she whispered, "Do you feel him? He's here." I didn't feel anything except cold and terrified. That was the first of many. Every Sunday night after that, she woke me after midnight and dragged me into the woods. Each time, the rituals grew stranger. Some nights she lit candles and placed them around the circle, their flames flickering in the breeze. Other nights she burned things, scraps of paper with names scribbled on them, torn out Bible pages, old dolls she'd find at yard sales. Once she burned one of my toys, a plastic soldier I'd had since I was little. I begged her not to, but she said sacrifices had to mean something. Sometimes she cut her own skin with a kitchen knife, letting the blood drip into the dirt. She smeared it across my forehead with her finger, whispering that it marked me as chosen. If I cried, she slapped me, hissing that tears were weakness. By day, she acted like nothing had happened. She cooked breakfast, asked about school, even laughed at my jokes sometimes. But her eyes never left me. They were sharp, calculating, like she was waiting for me to slip. I tried to tell people once. I hinted at it to a neighbor, an old man named Charles who sometimes dropped by to deliver eggs. He looked at me, confused, and said, Your mama sure is devoted." Then he chuckled and changed the subject. After that, I didn't try again. The rituals grew darker as summer stretched on. One Sunday she made me kneel in the dirt for hours while she circled me, chanting words that didn't sound like English anymore. My knees ached. Mosquitoes bit at my arms, but every time I tried to move, she screamed, "Don't break the circle." Her voice cracked with such fury that I froze in place until she was done. Another night, she pressed a dead bird into my hands, its wings stiff and feathers damp with blood. "Hold it," she ordered. I gagged, but she slapped me and forced my fingers tighter around its tiny body. "God takes what is given," she whispered. I started dreading Sundays more than anything. Every other day of the week felt like waiting for a storm you knew would come. Then, one night in late August, she told me, "He's coming tonight." Her voice was steady, calm in a way that scared me more than her screams ever had. She woke me at midnight, lantern in one hand, a dead chicken dangling from the other. Its neck hung twisted, blood dripping onto the floor. My stomach turned, bile rising in my throat. We walked deeper into the woods than ever before. The air was thick, suffocating, and every step I took seemed to echo. The crickets that usually screamed in the night were silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. She drew a larger circle in the clearing, this time with ash instead of salt. She shoved me inside, pressed her Bible into my hands, and ordered, "Read." I stared at the pages. They were covered in her handwriting, verses crossed out and replaced with words that made no sense. My own name scrawled again and again, wedged into the text like it belonged there. Evan is chosen. Evan must bleed. Evan will obey. My hands shook so hard the book nearly fell. I can't," I whispered. Her eyes snapped to mine, blazing. She raised the knife she carried at her side. "Read." Tears blurred my vision. I stumbled through the twisted words, my voice cracking. She paced around me, her knife glinting in the lantern light, muttering, "He's here, he's watching, he's hungry." Then the woods went silent. No wind, no insects, nothing but the thud of my heart and her ragged breathing. She dropped to her knees, arms raised, laughing and sobbing at once. "Take him," she screamed. "Take my son, make him yours." Something shifted in the air. I don't know how to describe it. The hairs on my arms stood up, my stomach clenched, and for a moment, I swore I wasn't alone. Something unseen was there with us, pressing in close, watching. I bolted. I shoved past her and ran blindly through the trees, branches clawing at my skin. My feet slipped on the damp ground, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. My lungs burned, tears streaming down my face until I finally saw the faint glow of our house through the trees. I slammed the door shut behind me, locked it, and collapsed on the floor, sobbing. My chest heaved, my whole body shaking. Minutes later, I heard her outside. Her voice was low, almost tender. "Evan, open the door. He didn't take you. That means you're still mine." I curled tighter on the floor, praying she'd go away. When I woke the next morning, she was back inside, humming in the kitchen like nothing had happened. The chicken was gone. The knife was clean. She served me pancakes, smiling sweetly, as if the night before had been a dream. I stayed with her for 3 more months before my dad finally got custody. I never told him everything. How could I? How could I make him understand the woods going silent? The way something unseen pressed in close. The way she screamed for God to take me. Even now, years later, I dream of that night, of her voice echoing through the trees, begging something to take me. And every time I wake, I wonder if she was insane, or if she really did invite something into those woods. Because sometimes, when the world goes quiet, I swear I still feel it. I woke up in the hospital with a tube down my throat and my leg in a cast. The nurse told me I was lucky to be alive, that most kids don't walk away after being hit head-on by a car. She said it like it was a miracle, but all I could think about wasn't the car or the pain, or the machines beeping around me. It was the last thing my mom whispered in my ear before the headlights swallowed me. "Don't move." She said it calmly, almost kindly, like she wasn't warning me but testing me. Like the car wasn't a danger at all, just another one of her lessons. I didn't tell the nurse. I didn't tell the officer who came by to ask questions. I didn't even tell my dad when he showed up 2 days later, pacing by my bed with his jaw clenched and his eyes filled with worry. Because even at 12 years old, I knew no one would believe me if I said my own mother had guided me into the street and held me there while a car bore down on us. They'd say trauma confused me, that I was misremembering. They'd never believe she smiled when she yanked me back just a fraction too late, letting the bumper clip my leg. But I knew the truth. Because it wasn't the first time. The first time she called it a lesson, I was 8 years old and standing on a stool in the kitchen. I was reaching for a glass on the top shelf, stretching on my tiptoes, when she asked what I'd do if I fell. I remember glancing down at her, confused by the question, and before I could answer, she kicked the stool out from under me. I crashed to the floor, glass shattering beside me, pain exploding in my elbow as it tore open on the jagged edge. I screamed, and she knelt beside me with the calm expression of someone who had expected this outcome all along. "See?" she whispered. "Now you know what it feels like. Now you'll be more careful." She cleaned the wound, wrapped it in gauze, kissed my forehead, and sent me back to play like nothing had happened. After that, accidents became routine. She warned me about dangers, and then those exact things happened. "Don't run on the porch," she said. And a day later a step collapsed under my foot, sending me tumbling into the dirt hard enough to split my chin. "Don't touch the stove without looking," she told me. And 2 days later a pot of boiling water tipped just as I walked past, scalding my hand. "Don't play with plugs," she said, and the next morning the cover on one of the outlets was gone. When I stuck the toaster in, a jolt snapped through me so hard I saw spots. Each time she stood there, watching, not rushing to help, not screaming in panic, just waiting. Then she'd repeat her phrase, "Now you know." At school, teachers asked about the cuts and bruises. I told them they were accidents, because that was the truth in the simplest terms. They didn't ask further. My mom smiled when she dropped me off, joked about me being clumsy, and the teachers laughed along. I wanted to scream that it wasn't clumsy, it was deliberate, but the words stuck in my throat. Who would believe me? The bathtub came next. I was 9, splashing soap bubbles across the rim, pretending to make beards on my chin, when suddenly her hands shoved me under. Water flooded my nose and ears, my chest burning as I flailed. Just when my body began to convulse for air, she let go. I shot upward, coughing, gasping, sputtering. She sat on the stool beside the tub, serene, her eyes shining in the steam. "Now you know what drowning feels like," she said softly. "Now you'll fight harder if it ever happens for real." I shook and cried, begging her never to do it again. But she only stroked my hair like it was a bedtime story. By 10, the lessons were constant. She left the back door wide open at night, then woke me at 2 in the morning and asked if I'd noticed. She locked me in the basement for hours, whispering through the crack in the door, "Can you hear the silence? This is how the world feels when you're forgotten." She placed knives just on the edge of the counter, waiting for me to knock them off. Once she left bleach open under the sink, and when I asked why, she smiled and said, "If you don't know how to handle poison, the world will handle you." I tried to avoid her, tried to stay in my room, but sometimes I woke to find the door unlocked and her silhouette standing in the doorway. "Sleep lightly," she'd whisper. "You never know when danger comes." I stopped sleeping deeply after that. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of headlights across the wall outside made me bolt upright, heart hammering. By 11, I was broken down to instinct. I didn't cry anymore when it happened. I didn't scream. That only made things worse. I learned to keep silent, to take the hit, to grit my teeth and wait for the pain to pass. Because when I cried, she said I was weak. When I tried to run, She punished me with harsher lessons. When I begged her to stop, she shook her head and whispered, "Someday you'll thank me." The car was the worst. One evening she asked me to walk across the street to get the mail. I hesitated, something in her eyes making my stomach twist. She stood behind me, her hand heavy on my shoulder. A pair of headlights appeared at the end of the block. "Don't move," she whispered. My body locked. The car rushed closer, horn blaring. The bumper slammed into my leg as I crumpled to the pavement, pain flooding me, white hot and unbearable. She didn't scream. She didn't rush to me. She just stood there calmly until the driver leapt out, panicked. Only then did she bend down, stroke my cheek and whisper, "Now you know." I spent weeks in the hospital. My dad visited, furious but helpless, since custody had always favored her. He asked me what happened, why I stepped into the street. I stared at him, wanting to tell the truth, but her face hovered in my mind, her warning echoing in my ears. "Don't move." I swallowed the words and told him it was an accident. After I came home, I expected her to stop, but she didn't. If anything, the lessons grew bolder. She set the toaster oven on fire while I was in the kitchen, then told me to figure out how to put it out. She left pills scattered on the counter, asking if I knew which ones would kill me. She drove too fast on icy roads, laughing when I cried in the passenger seat. "This is how you learn," she said. "No one else will teach you." Neighbors whispered that she was strict, maybe odd, but no one interfered. To the world, she was still a hard-working mother doing her best. To me, she was a predator with a smile. Every day I lived in fear of the next lesson, the next staged accident, the next moment where she'd push me just far enough toward death to make me think it was real. The worst part wasn't the pain or the fear. It was the way she looked at me afterward. Like I wasn't her son but her experiment. Like I wasn't a boy but a test subject she was molding into something else. And no matter how much I wished it, no matter how many times I prayed it would stop, she never did. Because to her, I wasn't her child. I was her project. And sometimes, even now when I step off a curb, or climb a ladder, or turn on the stove, I hear her voice again in my head. Calm, steady, testing. Now you know. The first night I stayed in that house, I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps above me. Slow, steady creaks that paced back and forth like someone couldn't sleep. That shouldn't have been possible. My room was already on the top floor. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just the house settling, but the rhythm was too deliberate. 1, 2, 3, pause. Then again, in the same spot. I held my breath until it finally stopped. That was my welcome to Denise's house, my friend's mom, who had taken me in when I needed a place to stay. And from that first night, something about her in that house was off. It had all started a week earlier. My roommate bailed on our lease back in Sacramento, leaving me with rent I couldn't cover. My buddy Josh, someone I'd grown up with but hadn't seen much since high school, said his mom had a spare room in Reno. She sometimes rented it out cheap to students or workers who needed a stopgap. I'd been to their place once or twice years back. Denise was always polite, maybe a little too polished. When Josh called her, she said yes, right away. I could stay in the room at the end of the hall, cheap rent, meals included. I thought I'd lucked out. The day I arrived, she greeted me at the door like she'd been rehearsing. Big smile, floral dress, hair neatly tied back. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and cinnamon candles. She hugged me like family, though I hadn't seen her in years, and said she was so glad to have a young man in the house again. That phrasing landed strange, but I shrugged it off. The room itself looked ordinary. Beige carpet, small desk, twin bed, one window that overlooked the backyard. Next to it was a locked door. I asked if it was a closet. She said it was just storage and changed the subject quickly. I moved my duffel bags in, set up my laptop, and told myself it was temporary. A month, maybe 2. The first couple of days were fine. Denise was overly attentive, but in a way that was hard to complain about. She cooked breakfast and dinner every day, washed my clothes without asking, and knocked on my door at night to see if I needed anything. I figured she was just motherly. But then came the noises. After that first night with the footsteps, I couldn't sleep easily. The next evening, just past midnight, I heard something heavier, like furniture being dragged across the floor. It was muffled, but it came from behind that locked door. I froze in bed, heart pounding, until it stopped. The next morning at breakfast, I asked if the neighbors had kids. She gave me that same tight smile and said, "It's always been quiet here. You'll get used to the house creaking." Her tone left no room for follow-up. That night I heard it again. Only this time it wasn't dragging, it was knocking. 3 soft knocks from inside the wall, exactly where that locked door was. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, staring at the door across the hall. The knocks came again, then silence. I didn't sleep at all. Over the next week I noticed more. Denise had this way of appearing without warning. I'd leave my room to grab water at night, and she'd be standing at the end of the hallway like she'd been waiting for me. When I jumped, she'd laugh softly and say, "Just checking on you." One afternoon I came home early from work. She didn't hear me come in, and I caught her crouched at my bedroom door, peeking under the gap. When she realized I was behind her, she straightened up fast, smoothed her dress, and said she'd been dusting the floorboards. I should have left then, but I didn't. The turning point came the next Friday. I'd gone to bed late, scrolling on my phone. Around 1 in the morning I heard it again, the muffled thumping. This time I crept out of my room barefoot, moving slow. The hallway was dark except for a nightlight near Denise's room. I stopped at the locked door and pressed my ear against it. For a moment, nothing. Then a whisper. Weak, hoarse, impossible to mistake. "Help me." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. I wanted to run, but then Denise's door opened. She stood there in the dim light, her silhouette sharp against the glow. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, her voice calm. I stammered something about getting water and hurried downstairs. My hands were shaking so bad I spilled half the glass before I could drink it. When I came back up, the hallway was empty. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. She served me eggs and bacon, humming softly. Then she looked at me, eyes unblinking, and said, "You should stay out of places that aren't yours." I didn't answer. By then, I couldn't think about anything else. The knocks, the whisper, the locked door. I started planning when I could try to open it. I needed proof I wasn't losing my mind. 2 nights later, she went out for groceries. I waited until her car pulled out of the driveway, then grabbed a bobby pin I'd swiped from the bathroom. My hands shook as I fiddled with the lock. It took longer than I expected, but finally, with a soft click, it gave. The smell hit me first. Stale, sour, mixed with something metallic. The room was nearly bare except for a narrow bed bolted to the floor. On it, chained by the ankle, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 12. His hair was matted, his skin pale. His eyes went wide when he saw me. He tried to speak, but it came out as a rasp. I held my finger to my lips, terrified Denise might come back. "I'll get you out," I whispered. "Just stay quiet." Before I could move further, headlights swept across the wall. She was back. I panicked, backing away, but the door swung open before I could shut it. Denise stood there, grocery bags dangling from her arms. She saw the boy, saw me, and her face changed. The smile vanished, replaced with something raw, furious. "You weren't supposed to see this," she hissed. I shoved past her, sprinting down the hall, down the stairs, and out the front door barefoot. I didn't stop until I was in my car, engine roaring, tires screeching onto the street. I called the police from a gas station 5 miles away. When they searched the house, they found the boy exactly as I described, malnourished, chained, barely alive. He'd been reported missing 6 months earlier. Denise was arrested that night. On the news, they said she confessed to replacing her son, who had run away 2 years before. She couldn't let go. She needed another boy in the house, one she could control. I moved out of Reno after that. I couldn't stomach staying anywhere near that street. But sometimes, even now, I wake up in the dark to phantom sounds above me. Slow, deliberate footsteps that shouldn't exist. And I remember the boy's whisper through that door. Help me. And I wonder how many other doors like that are still locked, hiding secrets nobody's opened yet. The first night I slept in Denise Whitaker's house, I woke at 3:12 a.m. to the sound of my own voice whispering my name. I sat up fast, ears ringing, staring at the small dresser mirror across from the bed. In the faint moonlight, the reflection showed the same room I was in. But my reflection wasn't sitting up. It was still lying down, eyes closed. Then, without opening its mouth, the reflection whispered my name again. That was the moment I realized I'd made the worst mistake of my life moving into that house. I was a junior at Salem State University, desperate for cheap rent. The town's old houses were expensive, but one of my professors put me in touch with a woman who helped students out. Denise lived in a creaky colonial on the edge of town. She told me she had raised her son there before he moved on. She never explained what that meant. When I first saw the house, it looked like a postcard of New England history. Peeling white paint, gabled roof, a yard choked with vines. The inside was dim, heavy curtains blotting out the sun, the air thick with the smell of lavender and mildew. Denise greeted me in the foyer, smiling too wide. She wore a pale dress like something from another era. She moved with a grace that felt rehearsed, like every step had been planned. I keep the house tidy, she said, leading me upstairs. There are rules here, though. She opened the door to a narrow attic room, a twin bed, a desk, and 3 mirrors. One above the dresser, one nailed to the closet door, one freestanding against the wall. They caught my reflection from every angle. The rules are simple, she said, her smile fading. Never look into the mirrors after midnight. Never move them. Never cover them. And if you hear me call your name at night, you must answer. I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. She didn't laugh back. For the first week, I kept telling myself the mirrors were just an eccentric quirk. Old house, old lady, weird rules. No big deal. Classes kept me busy, and Denise was polite enough, though she watched me too closely at dinner, eyes darting between me and the mirrors in the dining room. The first incident came on a Thursday. I'd stayed up late studying, the clock past 1. I stretched, glanced at the dresser mirror, and froze. My reflection didn't move. I raised my hand. It stayed at its side. I leaned forward. It stared back blankly. Then, with lips sealed, it whispered, "Evan." I yanked the blanket over the mirror and stumbled back. A second later, Denise's voice floated up the stairs, calm but sharp. "You broke the rule." I pulled the blanket away, shaking. The reflection copied me instantly, like nothing had happened. The next morning, she set a bowl of oatmeal in front of me and said, "You mustn't upset them, they notice." I asked what she meant. She only smiled and said, "You'll see." That weekend, things escalated. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed the bathroom mirror was fogged except for one clear patch, as though someone had wiped it from the inside. In that patch, words appeared, forming slowly. "Come closer." I dropped the toothbrush and bolted. Denise was waiting in the hallway. She touched my shoulder gently and whispered, "They like you." Each night after, it worsened. I'd hear whispers in unison from all 3 mirrors in my room, calling my name, urging me to stay, to lie down, to become theirs. Sometimes the whispers weren't my name. They were hers. Mom. Mother. Mama. By the second week, I'd stopped sleeping. My grades tanked. My friends said I looked pale, sick. I tried to tell one of them about the mirrors, but the words died in my throat. Something in me felt like if I spoke too much about it, they'd hear. Denise noticed. At dinner, she leaned across the table, eyes glinting in the candlelight. "You're fading, dear." "That's good. It means they're pulling you in." "Don't resist," I snapped, asking her what the hell was going on. She tilted her head, her voice soft. "A mother doesn't let her children leave. She keeps them, even when they're gone." That night, I tried to break the rules. I dragged the freestanding mirror to the corner and flipped it around. As soon as I let go, a shriek tore through the room. High-pitched, inhuman, coming from the glass itself. My ears rang. Blood dripped from my nose. The mirror toppled back upright on its own. My reflection grinned at me, though I wasn't smiling. From downstairs, Denise's voice floated up, calm and cold. "Don't make me come up there." By the third week, I was losing touch with reality. My reflection lagged behind me now, moving seconds too late. Sometimes I'd see someone else entirely in the mirror, a boy about my age, pale and hollow-eyed, mouth opening and closing in a scream I couldn't hear. One night, desperate, I called Josh, the son she'd mentioned. He didn't pick up. Instead, a voice answered, low and broken. "She doesn't let us go." Then the line cut. The final night is seared into me. I woke at 3 a.m. to every mirror in my room humming, a low vibration rattling the glass. My reflection stood beside my bed while I lay down, eyes shut. Then its hand pressed against the inside of the mirror. The glass bulged outward like water. Behind it, dozens of faces appeared. Children, teenagers, all pale, all staring. Their mouths opened in perfect unison. "Mother." The glass split. Cold air poured into the room. A hand gripped my wrist. I screamed and pulled back, slamming against the wall. Denise burst in, her face twisted, eyes black as tar. "Don't fight them," she shrieked. "They're your family now." The reflection yanked harder. The glass cut my arm, blood smearing the surface. Denise rushed forward, pushing me toward the mirror. Her strength was impossible, inhuman. Her fingers dug into my shoulders. I used everything I had to shove her back, sending her crashing into the freestanding mirror. It shattered, glass exploding outward. She collapsed in a heap, screaming like a banshee, her body convulsing as shards pierced her skin. The other mirrors cracked in unison, their surfaces darkening. I bolted from the house barefoot, blood running down my arm. Police later told me they found Denise dead in the wreckage of the mirror, glass embedded deep into her chest. The attic was filled with old photographs, dozens of different young men, labeled with names and dates. None of them were me. They never found her son. It's been months since. I can't be near mirrors anymore. I cover every reflective surface in my apartment, but sometimes in the dark, I hear it anyway. A whisper, just above a breath. "Evan." And I know one day, when I'm too tired to fight it, I'll look, and she'll be waiting on the other side. The first time I woke up in her house, I thought I was dreaming. I had gone to bed in my own room in my own apartment on the east side of Detroit. But when my eyes opened again, I was lying in a narrow bed with a floral quilt, a wooden crucifix on the wall, and lace curtains over the windows. And a woman I'd never seen before was sitting in a rocking chair in the corner, watching me. She smiled the moment I stirred. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm, syrupy, almost rehearsed. "You had such a long sleep. Mommy made you breakfast." I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy, my limbs sluggish, like I'd been drugged. "Where am I?" I croaked. "You're home," she said simply. That was the beginning of the longest, most horrifying night of my life. I'm 22 now, but this happened when I was 16. I was living with my dad in a rundown 2-bedroom apartment, working part-time at a car wash after school. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Dad did what he could, and I was used to taking care of myself. That night, I remember falling asleep to the sound of cars on the highway outside. Nothing strange. No noise, No break-in, just sleep. And then, waking up in that room. The house was old. Wallpaper peeling in strips. Carpet the color of rust. A faint smell of vinegar mixed with roses. On the dresser was a row of porcelain dolls, all lined up, their painted eyes staring. The woman looked 50, maybe older. Stringy brown hair pulled back tight. She wore a faded blue dress with an apron. She looked like someone's church-going grandmother, except for her eyes. They were wide, unblinking, and fixed on me with a hunger I couldn't name. She stood, smoothing the apron. "Come now," she said softly. "Don't dawdle. We have a big day ahead." I tried to argue, to say she had the wrong person, but my tongue felt thick, my mind clouded. My body moved slower than my thoughts. She led me into a kitchen straight out of the 1970s. Linoleum floors, yellow cabinets, a round oak table set for three. A plate of pancakes, a glass of milk, and a fork set neatly in front of each chair. "Sit," she said, and I did. It was like my body wasn't entirely mine. She sat across from me, folding her hands, smiling too wide. "Say grace." When I didn't move, she grabbed my hands in hers, squeezing hard. Her skin was cold. "Say grace," she repeated, louder this time. So I did, fumbling through the words my grandmother had taught me years ago. She nodded approvingly, then pushed the plate toward me. The pancakes were stone cold. All day, she kept me busy. She handed me clothes that didn't fit. A collared shirt, stiff jeans, shoes 2 sizes too small. She made me mow her tiny patch of backyard grass with a rusted push mower. She made me wash dishes, fold laundry that wasn't mine, even sit and do a puzzle with her in silence. Every so often she'd murmur, "That's my good boy," or, "You're better than the last one." The way she said it chilled me. That night, after dinner, cold stew, watery, tasteless. She tucked me back into the little bed. She kissed my forehead, her lips dry and cracked. "Mommy loves you," she whispered. I lay there frozen until she closed the door. Then I heard something from the closet. A soft scratching. Then a voice, hoarse and broken. "Get out while you can." The next morning she acted like nothing was wrong. She put me back in those stiff clothes, handed me a broom, told me to sweep the porch. When I asked her who else was in the house, her smile faltered. "Don't be silly," she said sharply. "It's just us. It's always been just us." But that night, when she thought I was asleep, I saw her. She opened the closet slowly and whispered into it. I couldn't hear all the words, just fragments. "He's better, he'll last longer, I promise." When she shut the door, I swear I heard crying from inside. I tried to escape on the 3rd day. Or at least I thought it was the 3rd. Time felt slippery there. While she was hanging laundry in the yard, I crept to the front door. My head still felt foggy, but I managed to unlock it and stumble out into the street. The neighborhood was wrong. Every house looked abandoned. Windows boarded, grass overgrown. No cars, no people. The sky had a gray tint, like the world was faded. I ran anyway. Block after block, nothing changed, just rows of empty houses. And when I finally turned a corner, I was standing right back in front of her porch. She was there, waiting, holding the laundry basket, smiling calmly. "You must never try that again," she said softly, "or Mommy will have to punish you." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. That night was the worst. She sat at the foot of my bed in the dark, humming. The tune was warped, halting, like a lullaby remembered wrong. I tried to pretend I was asleep. After a while, she leaned close, her breath hot on my ear. "You're almost ready," she whispered. Then she left. I didn't sleep. Hours later, the scratching started again. The voice from the closet. Stronger this time. "She'll keep you. Don't let her. Don't eat the food. Don't let her call you by his name." The door creaked open. I turned my head, heart hammering. A boy stood there, pale, thin, eyes sunken deep into his skull. He looked maybe 14, his lips cracked into a broken smile. "She borrowed me too," he said softly. "But she didn't return me." And then he was gone. The next morning she was waiting with a new set of clothes. Smaller. Younger. "They fit better," she said, voice trembling with excitement. "Now let's practice your lines. Say it. 'I love you, Mom.'" I shook my head. She slapped me hard across the face, the first real violence I'd felt from her. My ears rang. "Say it," she hissed. So I did. My voice cracked. She smiled wide, tears welling in her eyes. "Good boy. My good boy." That night I couldn't take it anymore. While she dozed in the rocking chair, I slipped out of the bed and went for the window. It was painted shut, but I slammed my shoulder into it until the wood cracked. I squeezed through, cutting my arms on the glass, and dropped into the yard. This time when I ran, the neighborhood wasn't abandoned. It was mine. The same cracked sidewalks, the same distant highway. I sprinted until I collapsed in my own front yard. My dad found me at dawn, curled up on the grass, bleeding and hysterical. When I told him what happened, he didn't believe me. Neither did the cops. They said I must have been sleepwalking or hallucinating from stress. They couldn't explain the bruises, the cuts, the clothes that weren't mine, but they wrote it off anyway. For years I tried to bury it, but sometimes late at night I'd wake up and smell roses. I'd hear the creak of a rocking chair in the corner, and I'd remember what the boy said. She borrowed me too, but she didn't return me. 2 months ago, I read an article about a missing child. A boy, 9 years old. He'd vanished from his bed in the middle of the night. No sign of forced entry, no ransom, no leads. The photo in the article made me sick, because he was wearing the same collared shirt, the same stiff jeans, the same 2 small shoes she'd put on me, and in the reflection on the dresser behind him, barely visible, was the blur of a rocking chair, and someone sitting in it.